Hello, welcome to the Alone Show. I'm your host, John Alone. In this episode, no regulars, because reasons as always. As for our guest, he is from somewhere in California, in the United States of America. He is an author, developer, sound designer, video editor, graphic designer, voiceover, etc., and just production in general. It's just a lot to go through. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Matthew Carudo.
Thanks. It's nice to be here.
Yes. So, how's life?
It's great, actually. I was literally just working on the late end of Diamond Dragons 4. I actually released the first half of the book digitally only at this point over the summer solstice. And the way it works with my books is that I always release the digital versions on the summer solstices and then the print versions, the hardcover and paperbacks on the winter solstices. Now, granted, this is the first time that I've only released half of the book, and I might leave it that way. I might leave the digital version as half only, and then just continue on with the print versions for books 4, 5, and 6 and whatnot. But that's where I'm at, and it just was really exciting. I was connecting literally something that I had kind of rough drafted, if you will, back in 2021 for the ending of book 4. And now here I am revisiting those words, essentially 4 years later. And it was just really cool. Some images too, some illustrations and whatnot that I kind of rough crafted into the manuscript briefly. And so it's just interesting to like, oh my God, that's right. I did this 4 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what inspired you to work on Diamond Dragons?
For your listeners, really quick, I'll just say that if they want to learn more about me in depth, my website is diamond-dragons.com, so it's very easy. But my background is 30 plus years in performance, production, theater, acting, directing, sound design, some of these things that you were mentioning when you introduced the show. And of course, we don't need to go in all those details, but at the very least, people can understand like, oh, so this guy like does more than writing. He's not solely about the words on the page only, but sort of all of the aspects to storytelling. And also just some other background that I had was I was best known, I suppose, before I did all this Diamond Dragon stuff for doing live Star Wars style performances and events. I used to build the lightsaber props, and they were not just meant for show, they were meant for beating the bloody heck out of these things on stage against each other, doing full on backflips and crazy martial arts, not quite Jackie Chan style stuff, but damn near in some ways. And just doing storytelling through these shows. And sometimes I would teach these workshops at all sorts of conventions. Some of them I would fly out to different states and either instruct there or do different events. I was lucky enough to be called up by the Anderson Cooper Live Show and the Today Show in, I want to say it was 2013. And so I had a few moments on either one of those shows, which was fun. It was a great experience, really great to meet Anderson Cooper, uh, and all that. But the point being is storytelling, acting, directing, production in general has just been a part of my life for, like I said, 3 plus decades. So that's pretty much why I decided, hey, why not finally, now that I have the experience, do my own IP or brand, if you will. And mostly it just had to do with like, man, I want to see a story where it's like all the characters, essentially all, not 100%, but all of them are basically dragons. What would it be like, if you had a planet that this was their planet? They were the beings of this planet. And, how would their lives go? Would there be, magic in it? Would it be dangerous planet, far more dangerous than Earth? Would it be larger? And so all these things are covered throughout the series.
Yeah, I can see that somehow. But yeah, and are there any opportunities or jobs that you haven't done yet that you would like to do someday?
Interesting question. I would say that at this point, I mean, for the most part, the work that I do is pretty much what I've been doing for 30 plus years. Um, I've acted on stage, different types of roles, some of them heroes, some of them villains, some everything in between. Uh, Used to do a lot of singing. I was in a lot of musicals and whatnot, and I have a competent singing voice and whatnot. People can hear some of that on my own, on a different, channel of my video stuff and whatnot. I even, I'm just throwing out random things. I used to repair laserjet printers of all things. A long, long time ago, I didn't really know how to take anything apart, and I was pretty young at the time. And I was like, I want to try to find a job doing repairs if they'll teach me because, otherwise I don't know how to do any of this stuff. So I found this one job. It was really cool. And it was really interesting learning, just embracing taking, part of my French, taking shit apart and figuring out how to put it back together and maybe identify what the broken part is, if not more than one, and so on. So that also kind of bled into later when I designed these kind of saber props for these live productions that I did for like Star Wars style live fight work. I would build and I would solder the boards, all the little points on the PCB, the printed circuit boards, light up the LEDs, that made the lightsaber function. The sound, I would design the sounds for them. I mean, it was quite an undertaking. You got all these buttons and electronics. You got to stuff it all into, essentially, I don't know, what would you call it, a 10 to 12-inch pipe. It's kind of like 12 pounds of potatoes, 5-pound bag.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know. I would say that I've done quite a lot of jobs, and I suppose someone would have to approach me and say, "Aha, we would like you to do this." And I mean, you know, I think it would be best if those jobs that anybody approached with were things that were in my wheelhouse. If someone said, "Hey, I need you to direct a production," I'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's in my wheelhouse." But if someone said, "Hey, this guy over here, he's having an emergency. He needs, an emergency, heart." I'd be like, okay, I'm not a heart surgeon, so.
Yeah, absolutely. What could you give a 40-minute presentation on without any preparation?
These are very interesting questions. But I don't know where you're coming up with them, but I like it. It's very nice and off the cuff. Um, I've given actually tons of presentations and all sorts of things. When I used to do these kind of lightsaber workshops, when I would not only perform some fight sequences and whatnot, often at these different conventions, they would ask us, the hosts of the conventions, they say, could you, run a workshop? And I was absolutely. So very often I would be at these conventions and then pull out all these, lightsabers and be like, okay, everybody come over here, pick a lightsaber, da 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 da, and, hurry up, come on now, tidy up, and go over here, etc. Then I'll be like, okay, let's go over the basics with these things, and I would, kind of instruct, you know, sometimes a small class, sometimes a huge class, depends, um, and it was a lot of fun, a lot of work. It takes a lot of understanding of instruction, how to be clear, concise, but also like move things along, make sure people are actually engaging and learning. So there's a lot to that. I even taught some acting workshops in the past as well. And those were always a lot of fun because, again, drawing from my experience. And then previous to that, I was a saber fencer for many, many years. I had my share of golds and silvers and bronzes. Nothing Olympic or anything like that, but uh, I competed and had a lot of fun with that. And so I also taught classes in that. So that was a huge part of my background. I used to teach both youth and adults fencing, mostly group classes, but often private lessons, which are of course a whole nother basket of delios to handle. But that was also a lot of fun, and that's dealing with people, trying to read them as individuals, right? Some people are going to come to me very stubborn, right? Um, and then other people will be very what's the right word for it? Very open and sort of like picking up and listening well, and they're absorbing the material really well. And like I said, then there's the opposite where some people will be like, oh yeah, well, why does this work? And how about this? And that doesn't sound right. And you're like, oh, this is going to be tough.
Yeah, of course. Could have said it better myself. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
These questions, though, I love them. Um, I actually don't know. I mean, there's so many places in the world that are obviously very beautiful. Um, and then also places where it's like super remote, where you'd be like, wow, it'd be hard to, see anybody for miles and you'd have to go a long ways to get supplies and whatnot. So there are all sorts of things, even the idea some people might say, oh, I want to live in Hawaii. I'm like, those are islands though. You might, get to that position where you'd be like, I've seen it all. Um, but I always thought that New Zealand very beautiful. I know that a lot of people say that maybe because of Lord of the Rings, which is great. But I mean, that's not a bad place to think about. I visited France twice. I want to say, was it twice or thrice? Um, One was to get my diploma as a saber fencing instructor in general. In front of the what's called the FFE, but I won't go into all that. But the point was, yeah, like I really enjoyed being in France. That was fantastic. Been to Canada. It was, great to be in all these places. And I've been to New York several times. I don't know if I'd want to live there, but wow, like super busy, always something going on, especially there in Times Square. Amazing stuff. So, yeah, I wouldn't know what to say for that. There's obviously so many places on the earth. You could spend your whole life literally just saying, I am going to go to a different city every day. And you'd never make it. You'd never make it. You'd be old and gray, and maybe you would have explored, I don't know, 1% of the planet. I don't
Mm, yes, indeed. Would you rather speak all languages or talk to animals?
know. Wait, if I'm speaking all language, wouldn't that be included in the animal kingdom? Right? If I could speak cat and squirrel and moose and le- emu or something like that. I don't really know the answer to that. But I will say this: I had three cats a long time ago. They've all passed, but like I strongly, strongly believe that you know cats and like just like the way dogs can be taught and other animals, like they know what's going on. They like understand what's going on, but clearly they lack the vocal cords to use the same language we do, and we don't understand what's going on with their nuances of whatever you want to call it, chirps and barks, meows and squeaks, if you will. But yeah, as it seems that like dolphins have like a bloody complex language, and we just barely understand any of it. Like we kind of think we understand some aspects, but like literally in the last decade, they were like, "Yo, I think these dolphins have a different dialect." And you're like, wait, excuse me? And you're like, yeah, it kind of makes sense when you get down to it, but it's pretty shocking to some people. They just think that's, just a bunch of rubbish. And you're like, no, if you think about it, it makes sense. They're very intelligent. So they sort of have like their own way of talking between probably them and their own, I don't know, 20 friends. But then maybe these dolphins way over here, they don't talk the same. Again, sounds ridiculous. But when you really get down to it, you're like, I guess that makes sense. Just like it is with humans, right? If you were not born in the United States, you wouldn't be talking a certain way. If you were born in this area of China, you might be speaking Cantonese. If you're born over here, you're probably not. So,
Yes, there's so much to think about. Would you sleep on the wall or sleep on the ceiling?
where do you come up with these? I must
I
have
have
missed
no
something.
idea.
I must have missed something with this too. Is this your pod? This is how your podcast rolls, right? You just ask the random, cool, interesting, kind of almost philosophical questions and whatnot. Sleep on. Wait,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
you said sleep on the wall or wait, what?
Sleep, would you rather sleep on the wall or sleep on the ceiling?
How would you do either? You mean you have to be like hammocked in, or you're glued or strapped in somehow, like an astronaut or something?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe not, who knows?
Well, there you go. Who knows? We'll go with the who knows. I think it would depend on the gravity of the situation.
Okay, yeah, that sounds works. Have you ever met anyone famous?
Yeah, actually. I mean, so when it was 2013 and I was invited to be on the Anderson Cooper live show and also the Today Show that same weekend. And that had to do with all the live lightsaber work that I had done in the past. And I don't even exactly know how that happened. An associate of mine, really an ex student of mine, and I were teaching classes in San Francisco. I was doing all sorts of stuff for many years at that point. Again, it was 2013. I had been doing this stuff since, I don't know, 2005 and six, something like that. And then prior to that, all the fencing, the saber fencing, etc. But anyway, so I was able to meet Lester Holt, I think his name is. He's still around to this day doing news work and whatnot. I think it's NBC. And then, of course, Anderson Cooper Live, the Anderson Cooper Live show. I literally got to just briefly chat with him when we went on. And one of my favorite things about it's a super short segment. So then Anderson Cooper is there. We're doing all this stuff. They're wearing, goofy things and making a fun comedy bit out of it. And I think it was him and Lisa, I think her name was. They were fighting with the sabers. That's all. And then, the cheering from the audience and they cut. But then Anderson whispers to me because he's looking at the saber, which he just used. And of course, now I was holding it and they're like, okay, that's that. And da 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 da. And he's like, did you build that thing? And I said, yeah, I build all of them. And he's like, wow, that's impressive. So I just thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, Anderson Cooper, really stand up guy. I mean, in addition to just obviously meeting him for a few minutes, but like, clearly he's been a pretty strong journalist in the game for many years. And then I didn't get to talk to Lester more than just the TV segment. So that was that. But obviously he's been involved in the news, at least here in the United States, for a very long time. I also got to meet, on a separate note, in 2007, still related to the whole lightsaber thing. I met a gentleman named Alan Dean Foster, and I don't know if you're familiar with him. You might not be. Does it sound familiar or no?
Don't think so, no.
Okay, so not only did he write the book for The Last Starfighter, which was kind of a famous movie back in the 80s, but he was the ghost writer for the Star Wars books that George Lucas had, commissioned a person to do, although he, of course, had his name on it. But Alan Dean Foster was the one who actually wrote them. And then in the long run, obviously that later came out and it was not that big of a deal. In fact, he wrote the Star Wars 7 book. But I got to sit on a panel with Alan Dean Foster in 2007, and it's a long story how that happened, but it was just really cool to meet him. Um, Super amazing guy, very talented author, obviously, and ghostwriter, obviously. But it was really cool picking his brain about all sorts of things. And this is well before I began writing my series of Diamond Dragons. I really only started writing the books in 2021, but I had done my screenplay in 2018 and 2019. But that's not the point. The point is in 2007 when I met Alan Dean Foster, it was just really cool. I was like, oh man, I can get to talk to a professional writer briefly. This is great. I want to get his opinion on things. But yeah, he was really cool. Like the things he said, they made a lot of sense to me. Like I kind of expected some of the things he was going to say. And yeah, a lot of it was he just said, you just work really, 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 really hard. And a lot of times it's based on luck, if anything takes off. He says, he's like, I feel really lucky, Matthew, right? Like, I don't know how I got paired up with George Lucas. It could have been anybody, right? He says, I don't mean anybody, but he's like, I was just another, good writer. It could have easily been anyone. It could have been Clancy. It could have been anyone, And I was like, right, I get you. I understand. But I'm like, but it was you, and you're good. You're good. So, and I really, actually, I remember that book quite a bit when I was a kid, The Last Starfighter. And that's one of the main reasons I recognized his name when I went in to be on that panel, because it was all kind of like, not necessarily last minute, but I didn't know who else was on the panel. I just didn't have time. And then I was flipping through the program as I was walking towards this to be on it in, 30 minutes or whatever. And I was like, this person, okay, I don't know this person, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, Alan Dean Foster. Alan Dean Foster. Wait a minute. I think I know who. Wait a minute. It was like one of those moments. And I walk on in and I'm like, you're Alan Dean Foster. He's like, yeah, you must be the Jedi guy. Because I was wearing a damn, Jedi outfit for the performances that we were going to do. And I was like, what gave it away? So it was, I knew it was going to be a good conversation after that. Right? He's like, well, I wonder if you're here for some Star Wars. So.
Yes, totally worth it.
And so tell me about you then. What inspired you to do this show? And are you just literally asking them people random questions and whatnot?
Well, yeah, so basically how it goes, it all started many years ago when I was in college. I started, well, actually, there was this, okay, this is a very massive lore. So, there was an app. It was made by Dom Hoffman. It was supposed to be the new Vine, but, well, sadly it didn't take off,
I
both,
see.
both financially and brand-wise. However,
Fantastic, right? You're like, no.
yes. Uh-huh. So anyway, on this app, I met this guy from Scotland. He
Oh,
was
no.
wanting to operate this creator group, and I wanted to be part of his creator group. He said, "Yeah, welcome to the creator group." And me, him, and another guy from New York, maybe Long Island, perhaps. We got together, and the Scotland's guy's girlfriend from somewhere in the deep south. We did videos on YouTube for a while, and then
Right on.
the guy from Scotland told me, "Hey, uh, our podcast is doing very well. I was wondering if you want to start your own." And I said, "Yes, I'd like to start my own podcast." And got started with recording a couple episodes with people I knew, and then slowly over time, I got access to how to get more guests regarding what they do for a living and so on. And I've been doing that for like 2+ years, and here we are
Awesome.
today.
Well, awesome. That's good. That's awesome to hear it. And I mean, it's just, you know, like it sounds strange, I think, to some people, but like the idea of interviewing people is an art form in and of itself. Like I think so many people have seen so many talk shows, like people like maybe world famous or at least famous in the United States, like Conan O'Brien or Johnny Carson or David Letterman or just whatever, all the different ones from the past. Going way back to some of the old '50s shows or Ed Sullivan, all this kind of stuff. That they think that when the guests come on and the host is asking questions, that it's just so easy. And it's not. It's often not. You have to try to engage with them and draw them out to say something interesting. If you ask them just yes or no questions, this is a bad idea, right? Because it's like you're going to immediately lead yourself into asking another question, and you don't want to do that. You really have to work at it. It's a tough one. So yeah, I feel you on that, and part of it is having to you got to like enjoy it, and that can be difficult sometimes because every guest is different. Some of them can be standoffish. Some of them can be too direct. Like God knows when people get what's his name on there? I'm trying to Bill Burr. You ever heard of this comedian?
Maybe.
Oh my God, Bill Burr. I love Bill Burr. He's fantastic. But he's literally his whole shtick, and I think it's just because it's his personality. Bill Burr is no filter. And I mean, he will say the most crazy, rude, insane things, but he's so funny. He's so funny. He knows how to do it. Um, he's so insulting, purposely by design. Like, he will say the rudest things, but he'll make everybody laugh. So it's like, I'm sure there must be shows where they're like, we can't have Bill Burr on this show. And there's no way. There's no way we're having Bill Burr. And they're like, why not? They're like, because he's going to destroy us. So, anyway, interesting to think about that kind of stuff. So you've been doing it for 2.5 years, you say?
Yes,
And that's cool. And
I
then do
have.
you do you tend to like interview only certain types, or you're like, oh, it's all over the map? Sometimes authors, sometimes this person, sometimes singers, some like actors, whatever.
I'm very open with the kinds of guests I interview. Like, I had a couple of guests that were entrepreneurs. I had many authors, of course, people that were actors, someone that was I had one writer that was once part of the writing team for The Simpsons at some point. So
Oh,
that
very
was
good.
kind of cool. Yeah. And yeah, I also had this one interview with someone that has some knowledge, some conspiracy theories. Like it's all over the place. It's been quite a journey so far.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, smorgasbord. It's a tough one. I did a little bit of that. I had a brief run of I don't want to call them podcasts, but I just called them the Diamond Discussions, and I did just that. I kind of grabbed a whole bunch of different people around and just whatever. I proselyted out there on social media and said, "Hey guys, I'm doing this thing, and if you want to be on the show, just say hello. Hopefully, you have something interesting." And yeah, I kind of selected. of a pool of all the people that said stuff. I want to say I did about 20 to 30 shows, something like that. But I found that because I was doing them video and audio and whatnot, and I was trying to like edit them all together and throw up some graphics and all this kind of stuff during the things. It became pretty tough to just edit it all through. Um, and at that time, I was really busy working on my book series, so I kind of had to slow down on that. And so but that's cool. I really appreciate it. I think it's a fun journey to talk to different folks all over the world, things that we could not do like in the 90s and the early 2000s. It was just not as plausible unless you were on the Hollywood circuit, if you will, professional circuits where they were flying you all over to damn places and stuff. But now, with the benefit of having these sort of all digital podcasts, everybody can be in their own recording studios or the comfort of their own home and chime in on whatever it is that they're doing, acting, singing, dancing, writing, or who knows, maybe they're just an entrepreneur who's built a product. Like they're like, hey, I built these really cool mouse pads and they've got little Pikachus on them or something.
Mm, yes, of course. If you were to host a dinner party and you could invite five guests who are either dead or alive, who would you invite?
Oh man, five. Be like, why not six? I have no idea. It's a tough one, but I suppose if I needed to kind of craft it around like writing and storytelling, I would very much like to chat and have dinner with folks like Edmund Rostand. People would be like, "Who the hell is that?" Just to set the tone for people, because he was obviously did many different things, but he's most famous for writing Cyrano de Bergerac. Great book, fantastic film versions, especially the one with Jose Ferrer and Mala Powers from 1950. Beautiful version. Anyway, so that's like a good example. I would also love to chat with Carl Sagan. And for those who don't know who Carl Sagan was, he was not only sort of a philosopher, but an astronomer and sort of scientist. And the movie Contact, starring Jodie Foster and Tom Skerritt, Matthew McConaughey, several other folks, William Fichtner, great actor, character actor. But anyway, that film was based on his book, which Jodie Foster also did the audiobook for, which I think people can find it online now, YouTube and whatnot. So those are two examples. I'd probably want to chat with Shakespeare because his work has had so much influence on my own. Literally, one of my characters, I named them Bardish, which is a fun hint for that he's a bard, but also a bardish is a medieval weapon, like sort of an axe pike, if you will, sort of to a point, bardish. But so there's a minstrel character in my own work, and I tried to have it, where he was an homage to Shakespeare in some ways. And a lot of the dragons in my stories, they talk somewhat Shakespearean style. I'm trying to think of some other folks, but like, it would kind of revolve around that kind of stuff. I'd love to chat with George Lucas. I've seen so many of his interviews. I know that he's not always that popular anymore these days, but if people really look at some of the interviews that he's talked about, like when he's like talked to students en masse, or in these kind of deep interviews about the spiritual underpinnings of Star Wars and his work and whatnot, it's pretty interesting stuff. You can see that he's a very deep artist and whatnot. Yeah, certainly I'd want to have like Spielberg in the room. Why not? If these are available. Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of some other, situations. Peter Jackson, that would be awesome. He's just so dope. And I know everybody would say, "Oh, that's just because of Lord of the Rings." I'm like, no, also because Dead Alive or Brain Dead in the UK, I think it is. It's uh, different title. But I mean, you know, there's all sorts of artists out there. It'd be hard to choose. I love Natalie Portman. I'd love to, you know, pick her brain during this dinner that this what do you call it? This ghost dinner, if you will, or this facsimile of a dinner. I don't think that was it.
Yes.
I don't know how many I named. Was that five or six? I don't know. I
I
didn't
don't know.
count.
I've lost. Yeah, neither did I.
I
Do
mean, you
you
can
know?
if you want to ask about diamond dragons, you can. You don't have to, but I will quickly say for the listeners if they're interested in like a hero's journey that's akin to Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or The Matrix or Harry Potter or just whatever, those kinds of tales of, high adventure, high fantasy, but also, powerful drama. Um, it's diamond-dragons.com, and there's all sorts of free materials that people can look at. They don't have no necessity to buy anything if they don't want to. But yeah, if people are like, whoa, I checked out some of this stuff and I'm super interested, I'm like, great, and then maybe you will really enjoy it. But there's no necessity, but there's just so much that they can view. A lot of videos that I've kind of produced to kind of, get people excited about what the hell is going on in this whole hexology is really what it is. 6 books total, and I'm just about done with book 4, and I'm excited to launch it during the winter solstice of 2024.
Yes.
But you were
Very
saying you were
good.
going to ask another question.
Yes, I was gonna ask you, do you know a guy named Joe?
I knew a lot of Joes. Knew a lot of Joes. And it's funny, this
Huh?
guy named Joe Muniz, he used to go by Corbin Doss, not Corbin Dallas, but Corbin Doss. Joe Muniz. He was actually my first lightsaber designer guy for my live Star Wars shows. Because back in the day, in 2005 or so, 2004 and 5 really, I didn't know anything about soldering and wiring and electronics and batteries. And so I brought him aboard and said, "Hey, I'd like to hire you to build, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 of these lightsaber props." Um, and am I in the meantime, do you think you could help me with a little bit of the understanding I'm going onto these sites and everything and learning? And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's great. Well, this will be great. I'll have fun, and I won't charge you too much, but obviously we'll do it." So that was a lot of fun. He was a good guy, and he worked hard and he did the best he could with his knowledge, his limited knowledge too. He wasn't perfect or anything like that. But yeah. So believe me, I've known a lot of Joe.
Fair enough, fair enough. And that is all we have for this episode. It's great having you on, Matthew, talking about diamond dragons, lightsabers, possibly a third thing, and so much more. It's been great.
Well, Peter, I really appreciate it. And wait, one more time I say it's the Jaime Alone?
John Maloney.
Jaime Alone. Well, it was great to chat with you. Pleasure. I wish you some future success and feel free to say hello. And again, if people want to have a look, it's diamond-dragons.com if they are interested in these wonderful heroes' journeys and fantasy characters and all that kind of wonderful stuff.
Yeah, sounds good.
Well, hey,
And
well,
until next time, stay tuned for more.